Good morning and welcome to this webinar. We'll just wait a few minutes while more people join. As I said, welcome again. My name is Osman Sidat from the Regent Business School. I'm very happy to introduce today our webinar on later life entrepreneurship or mature entrepreneurship. The webinar will be facilitated by our Dean, Dr. Ronel Blom. But before I ask Dr. Blom to start the actual conversation with our special guest, just to remind you that you can use the chat function to communicate with your fellow participants, as well as pose any questions that you might have for our guest or any observations that you might want to make. Thank you very much. And thank you for attending and making the time to join our webinar. I'll hand over to Dr. Blom.
Thanks, Prof. Sidat. Thank you very much for the introduction. Please just in the interim also just to remember to keep your microphones on mute and to also keep your camera off just to help us with our connectivity problems. So it gives me great pleasure, and it's my privilege to welcome you this morning to this particular webinar, and of course also to welcome our guest, Mr. Michael Hook, to this webinar. Mr. Hook, just as maybe a general introduction to him, he's going to be talking for himself, speaking for himself, is the founder, as you saw on the invitation, of the Platinum Project. Now, I don't know how many of you are nearing retirement, but for me, this message of the Platinum Project can't be more timely. I'm also reminded, years ago with my father-in-law was an academic, and he was really a very well-known, world-renowned scholar. And he was forced to retire at the age of 65 because that was the acceptable thing to do at the time, and in fact it was policy. And I remember him saying, but I still have so much more to say and so much more to do. And he carried on working and publishing until his death, which was at 72. So for me, this whole idea of retiring is it's a foreign idea for me, but Michael will expand on that much more clearly than I do. So Michael boldly claims that retirement is dead. I agree. Furthermore, he says that the Platinum tribesmen, that's us, are all older people, have an enormous gift to give: knowledge, experience, expertise built up over decades of being in the trenches. So it is therefore time for us to become later life entrepreneurs. It's a concept that is intriguing and really exciting. So this morning's conversation will center on the stats, the background, the context, and on what we could and should be doing right now. So I would like to welcome Michael and step aside and give you an opportunity to expand on your ideas. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Dr. Blom. Retirement. You were saying 65, it was mandatory. In lots of careers and jobs, it was 60. And the scary thing was going back just a decade or so ago, the actuarial look at that was that you retired at your 55 or your 60, and you popped at 67. They gave you 7 years. And that could really have been through, in some cases, sheer boredom and frustration. Today, we've got at least another 25 or 30 years in the tank. And it's just inconceivable that the kind of knowledge we have, the experience we've gained, the things we have to offer, for us to really just go on gardening leave just can't happen. Just can't happen. So if we
and I don't want to either. I think taking from my father-in-law's example, it's a question of, but why? I still have so much to give.
Yeah. And we certainly, as Platinum Tribes people, can certainly benefit both the workplace as well as social lives. You know, if we are lucky enough to ever retire and not need to work or bring in an income, it doesn't mean that we then excused from becoming useful or remaining useful. Then, you know, we've got to look at volunteering. We've got to look at mentoring, which is really important. We've got to use these later years. And when I talk to corporates and I say, look, we've got this concept where we want to take charge of people slated for retrenchment, earmarked for early retirement, a lot of them say, yeah, we've got a program, but if we dig a little bit deeper, the program's nothing more than advising the candidate how to make that payout last for the next 20 or 30 years. I believe that these next set of years, aside from the fact that may well be our most productive and lucrative, are also a chance to really expand and look at our place on the planet, why we're here, what we intend to do, make amends for things we've done in the past, make plans for the future. And so it's really not just about rands and cents only. It's about really finding a way to live our best lives in these 30 years that really have been gifted to our generation, and no generation before us. No generation before us has had this absolute opportunity to remain useful and remain productive.
I wanted to mention, and many people who work with me will know this, both my parents are still alive and I'm very fortunate. But I think that is unusual for that particular cohort. But nevertheless, my father is 90. So if I'm going to be following in his footsteps, I have quite a number of years ahead of me still. My mom is 86. So some good years that lie ahead, and certainly I would like to spend them in the best way that I can.
Yeah, and I think we must encourage those around us to remain young in outlook. Song from Clint Eastwood's movie, Don't Let the Old Man In. Don't let down the barriers, don't give up. Look upon this period ahead as something we can grab by the horns and really make happen. I'd like to refer, so a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about, and a lot of the things that we've included in our course are not my invention. They're close to my heart because I find myself in the kind of platinum years, and I'm starting to look forward and say, well, what am I going to do for the next 20 years or so? But a lot of the learning and things I've researched over the last year or two are thought leaders from around the world. Notably, and probably most famously, a guy called Chip Conley, who's got something called the Modern Elder Academy. Now, Chip is a very interesting guy. He sold for a lot of money a boutique hospitality company he had, with small boutique hotel type guest houses. And he suddenly found, as lots of people retiring do, that the phone stopped ringing. No one was calling him for advice. He was starting to feel a little bit left out. He was starting to despair. And then he got a call from some youngsters who said, listen, Chip, we need some advice. We found ourselves in the hospitality industry. We have an apartment opposite the convention center in San Francisco. And when the convention's on, there's no accommodation. So to help pay the rent, we went down to Army surplus stores and we bought a bunch of air vents. We blow these things up, and believe it or not, we're full the whole time. But this is as far as we can take it. We need some good experience. We're all in our 20s. We don't understand this hospitality business. The business is scaling quickly. We need some help. So for Chip, it was actually part of a lifeline. He joined the company, which we know today as Airbnb. And he joined it, interestingly, in two kind of roles. One was as a mentor to them and taught them the knowledge that he had gained. The other, he was really a trainee. So he called himself a mentee. So he was learning and he was teaching. And what really came out of it for Chip is if you meld these young, short attention span, absolutely tech savvy, fear nothing guys with the old grey beards who've had all these years of experience and good old know-how, then he reckons you've got absolute pure gold. And his message to companies, don't be too quick to kick the oldies out if you can describe people of 55 as old.
As old.
Yeah, maybe just give them a slightly different role. Maybe just tailor things a little bit, but there's an enormous amount to offer. And if we can harness this, well, we're onto something really, really strong. So Chip is one of the guys that I've learned a lot from. Camilla Cavendish in the UK, done lots of research on this whole business. And she finds that people starting businesses when they're over the age of 50, those businesses are statistically a heck of a lot more effective than youngsters starting business. And in fact, in the US, they found people over 60 starting businesses are becoming real employers. They employ lots and lots of people. So it doesn't think, look, my opportunity's gone, my chances is past. This really is the time to take these bold steps. From the point of view of Regent as a business school, I think probably even 20 years ago, the thought of offering MBAs to people over 50, I don't think you'd have takers. Well, today, why not? People are skilling themselves for the next 30 years. Hopefully, they've got the funds to do it. They've got the time to do it. And the grey matter is still there. Believe me, the grey matter is still there. Learning becomes quite simple because it's quite logical.
Yeah. So what does Camilla Cavendish say about why these businesses are seen to be so successful?
Well, I think because people use a little more brain than they do just pure emotion and heart. They've had careers. They've learned what works and what doesn't work. They've seen the gaps in what they've done and therefore tailored services to provide for those gaps. So Camilla is really endorsing not only people staying in the workplace, but people to go, I leave the workplace and start a brand new career.
Yeah, okay. I just want to, I'm just trying to note down some of your comments here and or start new career. So what are people doing? What kinds of things are they doing when they start a later life business?
Let's just look at a basic example. Everyone has some kind of a skill or some kind of a track record, some kind of an asset, some kind of a bent. So if I decided to retire today, I would say, okay, I've got this big house, the kids have left home. How do I maximize this asset? Should I turn it into an Airbnb? Should I turn it into a guest house, for example? If I can get the zoning, should I have a spaza shop on the territory? I've got a vehicle. Very basically, could I become an Uber driver? Could I become a shuttle driver? My milk tent is famous in the neighborhood. Well, could I really make a career out of making milk tent and marketing it? We've all got some kind of a talent, some kind of a hobby, some kind of a skill which could be scaled up to really become an income producer. We would talk to our peers in the same age group, but we would also reach out to the younger guys because this whole move and change and trend towards online shopping, which has really come in leaps and bounds in the last year or two. First of all, if we've got skills, we can sell them online via webinar, via selling time and talking to people. But also we can perhaps create something, do something to sell on Takealot or one of the other platforms. And here we must reach out to the younger guys because they know a little bit more about it than we do. And so, for example, we've got a guy called Warwick Kearns, who is probably the e-commerce expert in South Africa. And he has modules which we'll post on our site. So if you want to get into some kind of e-commerce, he will show you, he will instruct you every inch of the way. Similarly, if you are going to go the bed and breakfast or the guest house route, we've got a lady called Caroline Unger's book, very involved in tourism, and she's creating modules to show you how you go about it. What kind of zoning do you need? What kind of regulations? And once you've actually got to the stage where you've opened the guest house, well, how do you attract customers? So there are these many, many fields. If one starts to look at them and investigate them, there is a home for everyone. There's a slot for everyone.
So in other words, you start with something that you already have, either a skill or a talent or a hobby, or a facility. Like you say, you've got a big house, you know, you've got a car. You start with that. You say, okay, how can I utilize this as a business? Yeah.
Correct. How can I turn it into rands and cents? How can I keep myself busy? And then in brackets, young, because if we're busy, we are too busy to age. So the two absolutely go hand in hand. How do we turn it into an income stream? And if by so doing, we can employ one person, two people, three people, well, for the country, that's great. For the economy, it's great. And for our own self-esteem, it's great. Because what we're really doing in these 30 years, we've got to keep living. We've got to keep the money rolling in. The 6% that the government tells us it'll be able to retire are the lucky ones. If 6% can retire, it means 94 out of 100 people can't. So yes, we do need to keep the money rolling in, but we also need to define ourselves and define our lives thus far and going forward in the time going forward. And there I refer to a guy by the name of Lewis Richmond, who is actually a monk in San Francisco. Funnily enough, San Francisco, because that's where Chip's from as well. He wrote a book called Aging as a Spiritual Practice. And it is so full of advice on how in these years ahead to start to slow down, to start to contemplate, to see what really is real, what means to our heart. And a lot of these techniques we bring into our program and we put on our site. In fact, on the site, there is a video with Lewis, and he's a very interesting guy. And he is really the contemplative side of the Platinum Project, which is made up obviously of the business, of the contemplation, and then the community, how we can reach out and help, how we can ask for help, and how we can walk this path together.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about the project and how this has come about and where you're going with this.
Well, I did a lot of work in corporates over the years in personal transformation and teaching people ready to quit smoking. I kind of position myself as a South African expert on smoke cessation, but not just quitting smoking, taking that energy that we get and that move towards the positive and make changes in other parts of our lives too. So we're not only going to quit smoking, but we're going to start to run. We're going to start to eat better. So it's real personal transformation. And I kept coming up against this need that corporates were saying to us, look, we've got people leaving. What are we going to do with these people? You know, they're too young to really just go home and stagnate or prune the roses. So I started investigating it, looked for referrals to people like to Camilla, to Lewis Richmond, to Ram Das, who's my personal hero, and came up with a program which we presented in some of the corporates as a day-long event. And we're hoping that this is going to mutate into not only the day-long event, but a 3-day country-type retreat as well. Give us the time to really clear our heads, settle, look at what's important, make proper solid plans for the future based on the right reasons. And out of this became the Platinum Tribe, which at the moment is a website, a bunch of contributors who are creating content for us, and slowly blossoming into this tribe of people. It's our own little LinkedIn, our own Facebook, our own Rotary Society.
That's a network.
It's a network of like-minded people in the same position, wanting to help each other, wanting to help themselves, wanting to help our country.
And what is the uptake of what is the uptake of being of the and who comes to? I mean, you're saying you're working the corporates. which individuals are interested in this kind of thing?
Well, individuals are people that may already be retired, maybe work for themselves, may have heard of the project through the small presentations we do. Most of our work, I anticipate, is going to be through people that the corporates say, all right, here are 500 people, they due to be retired or their contract end at the end of the year. We're concerned about them. We do believe we've got an obligation to ensure their future, and therefore we will turn them over to you and ask you and your team to start to take them on this journey of adaptation and the start to find meaning in the later part of our lives.
No, fair enough. So if you wanted to link it now with a university or a formal institution, how do you envisage this playing itself out? Because obviously we are catering for not for later entrepreneurs. Our target market is for mostly mature learners, but also school leavers and so on. So I mean, how do you see the link between what you want to achieve with your project and becoming involved with an active university like ourselves?
Well, we are envisaging a faculty or a school or a branch, which we'd probably call the Faculty of Later Life Entrepreneurship. I really want it to be real, not just airy-fairy. So the university, as part of their online offerings, would post a series of short learning courses. And as I say, we've got about 40 planned or on the drawing board. And anyone who joins the tribe and starting to explore this possibility of stretching themselves and moving forward will be able to go through these videos and learning courses. Some of them paid for, of course. A lot of the people who are doing the content don't want to charge for the actual course, but they're using it as a calling card or a business card for people to say, okay, Warwick, I like what you're doing in terms of e-commerce. You've given me the basics. I've decided I'm going to do it. I now want to start the clock running and consult you. So it's a job creation thing as well as a service.
Okay, well, can you give us some details around those short courses? I'm not saying you must give us details in terms of the content, but just to, as a teaser, you know, what is it that that people will find if they are if they link up with you in terms of those short?
I think an easy one that comes to mind, if someone has retired and got some kind of substantial payout and they want to put that into invested in some kind of a business, one of the ones that immediately springs to mind is franchising, because it's so open. It's anything from food to transportation to absolutely anything at all. We would like to get and have the buy-in of people like the Franchise Association, people who bought franchises, giving you their advice, people steering you towards the right kind of franchise for you, and paint the picture of what it really means to own a coffee shop, or to drive an Uber, or to have a paint company. So there's an enormous amount of content there. The first is the advantage and the pros and cons of buying a franchise, and then we can break it up. Okay, in this sector, what are the franchises available? What do people who've already bought those franchises say? What can they recommend? How can they steer and guide us? So the least of our problem is content. There's an enormous amount of content.
Yeah. Now I'm just trying to, you know, create a kind of an interest in the kind of courses that you offer. So I mean, the franchises, that's an obvious business venture. What other kind of ventures do you foresee?
I think almost every family knows someone where someone is overseas caregiving. Now that's become an enormous business. I know two or three people in my own personal circle who go and do 4 and 6 month gigs overseas. as a caregiver. We've got experts who will talk to teach you how to do it, who will put you through the course, who will certify you. In some cases, will help place you. And for the right kind of person, first of all, the bucks are good. I mean, you earn in pounds and dollars. Secondly, if you always had an urge or a yen to travel, you kind of dovetailing.
Yes.
So that's another one that we've had lots of interest in, and lots of content providers available to really steer us in the right direction.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because, again, just from a personal point of view, I think the whole movement away from institutionalizing old people, as the kind of old age, I would say institution, not even an old age home. If the parent is not yet frail, then but you do need care. I mean, I think this is certainly, I've had personal experience of that, and it is a massive growing industry, and it's also a very necessary industry, and it needs. Yeah, and it needs a particular inclination, I would say, it's kind of a personal perspective that makes it work well, and so on. So yeah, it's been interesting.
And we South Africans hide our lights under a bushel sometimes. We're an amazing bunch of people. For all our failings and our dirty linen and infighting and all the rest, we're amazing people. And what's coming back in that caregiving industry is South Africans are fantastic caregivers. A lot of people have been nurses and then they've taken it one step further and done it as caregiving, but a lot of them were housewives, clerks, mothers, and the time came where they needed the employment, and they've turned out to be fantastic caring and sympathetic people. So we've got a great reputation for that.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, but these are kind of two very it's a different ends of the continuum, if you like, from a franchise, which is very client driven and shop driven, if you like, economy driven and so on, to a very personal service that is being offered through a caregiver. Any other examples?
Yeah, we mentioned to a certain extent online, and online is first of all selling goods, either importing goods and then selling them online, actually building and producing goods, which is my business. I'm in the herbal medicine business. I produce and make herbal medicine. I sell it on Take-A-Lot, and I've seen how Take-A-Lot has gone crazy in the last couple of years. But also using today's technology to dispense advice. So if you've been in a financial services company, at the end of the day, you probably have a good idea about budgeting, about stocks and shares. Perhaps you could use that knowledge to take and then to teach online share trading. Perhaps one could fill a personnel function, because we've been doing that for 20 or 30 years. We know it. So A, we can do that, but B, we have people in the tribe, notably a guy who lives from Knysna, a guy called Peter de Toy, who will teach you what you need to do from a technology point of view in order to be effective. So you've got to have the right computers, you've got to have the microphones, the lights, the recording equipment, the safety equipment, and he'll teach you how to set yourself up at home in your study to be able to consult online. And of course, take and make payments and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah. So I've been writing here in the chat, in terms of the online, the whole boom of online trade. And you mentioned selling goods, producing goods, for example, your herbal supplements, providing advice for financial services, for example, tax, maybe personnel functions. Let me just put that one in there, tax. And then personnel functions so I know a lot of small companies make use of outsourced human resources functions instead of having that in-house, and then technology advice and so on, for example, when you want to set up a home office and so on.
No, well, another one that springs to mind, because as we were talking before the webinar started, during lockdown, I wrote a book which really covers what we're talking about here and kind of shows where I want to take this whole concept. So writing a book, I had to find an editor. I found an online editor because this was during strict lockdown.
Correct.
Someone edited it and spell checked and that kind of thing for me. Another resource online that I found through the internet, you Google and you find, did the page layouts and that kind of thing. Someone else did the publicity and the book launch. So all these skills are available online. If we look in ourselves, well, we've got a skill somewhere. And it could generally be sold online. Not if you build swimming pools, of course, you've got to be there physically.
Physically,
but,
yes.
As we get to what they call this gig economy, it's really exciting. A lot of it can be done from home. And interestingly, slightly off the subject, talking to corporates and people in big companies, there's been no loss of productivity from people working at home. On the contrary, in lots of cases, people have been more effective, so much so that a lot of people are finding that they now need to slow themselves down because they're getting on the computer at 7 in the morning, they're leaving at 9 at night. So we really have to find this happy medium.
Yes, that's true. And yet, and yet we do need to see each other face to face. I mean, I think a lot of work can be done online and a lot of work can be done remotely. But there's nothing quite like, you know, not quite kneecap to kneecap or nose to nose, but at least 1.5 meters away from each other, you know, it doesn't really replace that. But I think, I don't know, what is your view about this? You know, how is this going to impact on corporates in the future? Because obviously one of the things that corporations have found is that, you know, they were able to run a business and the building was standing empty. What does that mean for that part, if you like, of the economy? What do you think?
Well, my first thought is, what are they going to do with all those buildings?
Yes.
Drive through now and there's no one in the building. Maybe they're going to repurpose them, turn them into apartments or whatever. We social beings, and I think we do need the contact. We went to a book launch the other night. A lady called Kim Potgieter launched a book on financial advice for people getting towards this platinum time, and she's one of our contributors. It was quite scary in a way, for it was the first time you were in a garden with a whole bunch of people. Most people were wearing masks, which we appreciated. Most people kind of standing a meter apart. But there was a drinks trolley and there were snacks and waiters bringing snacks around. It was quite strange. And I'm hoping that what would come out of this COVID is that we will cherish that contact and we'll take it a little bit more seriously. Not a cocktail party every night, because then it just becomes another cocktail party.
Yes, exactly.
Choose the gatherings you want to go to, talk to the people you want to talk to, really listen to them rather than cocktail chat. So maybe that's a positive that's going to come out of it. And when we do these face-to-faces, which, as I say, we absolutely need, they'll be more meaningful, they'll be clearer. Some years ago, there was an American lady, and I'm trying to think of her name, who came up with this idea of walk-in meetings. So if you had a meeting, she'd schedule it at 2 o'clock, you'd meet her outside the building, and you'd have a route, and you'd have your walk-in meeting. Productivity was fantastic because there were no distractions. People felt a camaraderie. The meetings were absolutely productive. And I think that's the kind of thing we want to foster.
Yeah, I think the face of let's call it corporatization, or the face of business is never going to look the same again. And we don't yet completely know what it entails and what it actually means. But I think that definitely it's not going to look the same as it did before. I'm actually interested to find out whether socially, the kind of social, not only economic impact, but the kind of social impact were impacts that were evident after the Spanish flu. And of course, COVID is being likened to the Spanish flu, certainly in terms of the tracing and the tracking of the disease. So I'm very interested to see socially what is it that we're actually coming out with as a result of COVID and the isolation from each other, particularly from loved ones. The kind of notion that people couldn't go and say goodbye to parents who were dying and that type of thing. So, I mean, what does it mean to us as social beings, as beings part of a community, and a particular, those traditions have been disrupted and prevented and so on. I think a lot of interesting studies are still going to come out of what has happened over the last year and a bit.
No doubt. And, dare we hope that the changes are going to be positive, that we're going to reconnect, I guess, with our humanity, that we're going to, again, realize that we're all part of one whole and we're on the same ship, and we may be very privileged, but if that ship sinks, we may be on the balcony cabins at the top. We're going to go down eventually as well. So yes. I really hope that some positives going to come out of this. Yeah. It's a very scary period that we've been through.
But I think, a lot of people also feel that that they've been in a position where they are able to do these things remotely. I feel very sorry for people who weren't in that position, who had to, despite the dangers that it posed to themselves and their families, had to go out there and go and do the work anyway. But nevertheless, maybe just you briefly mentioned your interest in also our impact on our world, and you just mentioned that again. Would you like to expand on those views a little bit, Michael?
Well, I would like to mention that a big part of the day-long immersions we do, and certainly the 3-day contemplative retreats, a big part of it is going to be this concept of logotherapy, the Viktor Frankl school of psychotherapy. Okay. For those not familiar, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. It's been an absolute bestseller for years and years and years. I read it some years ago and not sure I really understood it. I did do a course a couple of years ago with a guy called Classy Vessels and Sam Spark. And I was absolutely fascinated at this concept of finding meaning. Frankl was interned in the camps in Germany under the most horrific conditions. And he, during that period of time, helped people and looked after people and came up with this concept that as long as we can find meaning in any situation in which we find ourselves, if we have the why, the how will follow. So logotherapy is quite a complicated thing, and I don't pretend to be an expert in it at all, but certainly through Classy and Sam and a guy called Sean Waters, we'll be including this finding meaning in the courses we do. What has it all been about? Has it been worth it? What is our place on Earth? How are we going to maximize it? And then, without being too new agey and airy-fairy, to start to list the things that we need to do to change. So the first thing is, well, the clock's ticking. We may have 30 years, but the clock is ticking. How do we find meaning and worth in each new day? And what ritual are we going to do as we wake up each day? Are we going to be thankful for that day? Are we going to plan what we're going to do? Are we going to show gratitude for our positions and our fortunes in life? And how are we going to express that? Perhaps through a journal. What are we going to do with our remaining years? Are there people we need to apologize for? So one of the exercises we do, we write down a list of people that we may have wronged or may have misunderstood us. And we're going to physically either write them a letter or phone them or approach them and say, look, that thing had happened. It was wrong and I feel bad about it. I need it off my chest. I want to release myself.
Yes.
People that have angered us or we feel that have been unfair, we need to forgive them. And maybe again, it's a phone call, or maybe it's just in ourselves. We say, I'm letting that go. I'm not keeping that burden on my shoulders going forward. I'm releasing myself. I forgive you.
Yes.
Really nice example was talking to one of the psychologists that's part of the program, is this instance of divorce. So he divorced me, he ran off with his secretary, he's left me penniless. What am I going to do? And the subject we were talking about said, okay, I woke up one day and I said, why am I carrying this burden? I wrote him a letter, I said, I forgive you. It's not that I don't think you're a jerk. I think you are a jerk. You made a terrible mistake. You're never going to find anyone as good as me, but you've released me and I've met a really nice new man and I've changed careers. I'm in a better space. Therefore, I've grown from this experience. I'm not carrying the baggage with me anymore. I'll let you go.
I think that's quite liberating. I see, as Suzanne says, it makes sense. Love, Franklin. So thanks for bringing it home. And then, somebody asked, has Mr. Hook read Who Moved My Cheese?
I think I have somewhere down the road. I've got it in my bookshelf, and I think I have read it, but I won't comment it because, you know, as you get older, I find that in order to get new things in my head, I have to let old things go. So I'd have to go through my retrieval system, and yes, but I've read it in the past.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have a few minutes that we can dedicate to questions if there are any questions. Or any comments from the participants. So,
Dr. Blum, allow me, thank you. Michael, can we go back a little bit to perhaps how you would respond to somebody who's currently in the financial services sector, possibly due to be retrenched, not quite in their 60s, but you know, in part of what, as I think you're familiar with the kind of things that are happening, not only in the financial services sector, but as a result of you know, various factors. What would you say to them? I mean, besides telling them how to invest the package, what kind of things can you tell them?
Well, I would slip that question by referring them to Kim Potgieter, who, as I mentioned recently, has written a book on it. That's her speciality. So our Platinum Tribe is going to be this meeting center where if you want financial advice, there'll be someone there who's been through it and who's an expert in the field and will give you the proper advice. I'm really the catalyst here. So I talk glibly about Viktor Frankl and logotherapy and Lewis Richmond and using this later life as spiritual practice. I'm really the catalyst here. I'm not the expert, but I've researched them and I've pulled them all in, and I'm going to pull like-minded people in here so we have this absolute knowledge base that we can all access.
Okay, so your project, your Platinum Project, really is a platform where knowledgeable people come together, and where you need support or where you need advice, you can go to the appropriate person or the course.
Yeah, and not only need advice, if you're in a position to give advice, well, shoot a module, put it on the platform. You know, we envisage this huge data base of short learning courses. By short learning, I'm thinking like 50 minutes a time, where we get the gist of what is happening. Then if we want to consult that expert further, we can make contact with them through the tribe and engage them to go into depth. Not only on the skill side of things, but we've got some really good psychologists who would help that transition. One of the problems is people leaving formal employment. You leave the employment, you know, you have the going away party, you've been the mother of the organization or the lightning rod in the organization for so long, you feel you're indispensable, you have the party, 3 days later the balloons have popped, the cake has gone stale, your phone is not ringing, you're sitting at home, and in lots of cases an absolute despair sets in. a feeling of worthlessness. And from a psychological point of view, some people may want to seek help. And let's post experts in that field who can certainly help, and one can consult.
Okay. Prof. Sidat, anything else?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Dr. Blom. I'm fine.
And from the floor, any of the participants? Sean, thank you, Sean. Sean says, thank you very much for an inspirational webinar. I think that's been incredibly useful. I'll give it another minute or so. Anybody else from the floor? There was a question here, how do we reach Michael? Michael, do you have an email address that we can share?
Yes, Mike at Beyond Wellness Group.
It's one word, hey, Beyond Wellness Group. Yeah, .co.za.
Yeah, correct. That's my day-to-day address. As we expand the site, I'll put my numbers up. Please call me at any time. I'm not a prima donna. I love to talk to anyone, love to chat to everyone. And that's really what this tribe is about. I want people to lean on me. I want to lean on others.
Yes, 100%. And do you mind giving out your number, or do you rather keep to your email?
Not at all. 082 455 0338.
082 455 0338.
Yeah, just in part, we spoke about the necessity to get together. And one of the hopes for joining up with a business school is to use those premises and campuses around the country. And so I see in each of the campus every month there's some kind of a get-together with a distinct subject where people can come and get together, can volunteer to talk on whatever the subject is. So we talked about franchising. Imagine an evening where there was a chairman, people from 5 or 6 branches of different kind of franchises, a financial guy, and anyone who was interested could walk away there feeling a lot more informed than they would normally have been.
Yeah, 100%. Michael, we had an interesting tech-savvy question. Does your number have WhatsApp?
Yes.
Okay, there you are. The young people always find the cheaper way to communicate, but of course.
Well, my daughter told me, she was annoyed with me the other day because she told me I blue tick her on the reg. Now, I didn't know what that meant, but I did some research, and that was she had WhatsApped me and I hadn't acknowledged I'd read it.
Oh, so, I see.
I was in trouble. I blue ticked her on the reg.
Okay, there you are. All right. Well, Michael, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions emerging, but I hope this first meeting that we've had will have babies, and we will have many more meetings, and certainly some discussions. So I'm inviting everybody to go to your platform. It is on the invitation. You just have to click on the link and it takes you directly to that page. And excuse me, and of course, if you want to make contact with Michael directly, you've got his details. Any last words from you, Mike?
Well, I'm in my 60s. I've got a wife who's a little younger than me, and I've promised her I'm going to stick around. So I'm determined to make the next 30 years the very best of my life, and hopefully for that impact to spill over to the people around me.
Thank you very much. That was incredibly inspiring. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care and have a great day.
Nice to chat. Thank you, everybody.
You too. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Blom and Michael. We will now be ending this webinar. Thanks very much for your attendance. Bye.